Picture a beach at dawn. No warning, no buildup, just steel emerging from the surf. In the last 15 years, China has built more amphibious assault ships, landing craft, and swimming tanks than any other navy on the planet. Some of these vessels are giants, floating almost as long as 3 football fields. Others are barely visible until they are already on the sand. Together, they form the largest amphibious invasion toolkit assembled by any country since the Second World War, larger in raw numbers than what the United States, Britain, and France combined can currently put to sea. Tonight, we go through every piece of it. The helicopter carriers built to launch waves of troops before the enemy even sees the ships. The tanks that swim faster than most patrol boats. The barges disguised as ordinary construction equipment that can build a working pier in a single afternoon. Every hull, every armored vehicle, every piece of this fleet, laid out in full, from the ships everyone has already heard of, to the ones that only appeared in satellite photos a few months ago. This is China's amphibious assault force, exposed. Chapter 1. The Assault Carriers, China's New Power Projection Corps. Start with the Type 075. It is the largest amphibious warship China has ever built, and it changes the shape of the entire fleet just by existing. Before this class appeared, China's amphibious force was built almost entirely around flat-decked transport docks, ships good at carrying vehicles but limited in how many troops they could put ashore by air. The 075 rewrote that equation overnight. At full load, it displaces between 35 and 40,000 tons, stretching 232 meters from bow to stern. 4 of these ships are now active, all assigned to the Eastern Fleet, and each one can carry more than 800 Marines, along with up to 28 helicopters, everything from utility transports to attack variants pulled straight from the Army's own inventory. But the number that really matters here is 3. 3 landing doctrines, running at the same time. Troops go in vertically, by helicopter, dropping directly onto defended ground, far behind any beach defenses. Vehicles go in over the horizon, riding hovercraft launched from a flooded well deck, buried deep inside the hull, invisible until they are already moving at speed. And armor goes in horizontally, rolling straight down a stern ramp once the ship is close enough to the coast. Roughly 60 armored vehicles can be stored inside at once, ready the moment the doors open. A crew of over 1,000 sailors keeps the ship running, on top of the Marines it carries, making it one of the largest single deployments of personnel anywhere in the Chinese military. The first Type 075 was revealed publicly in September 2019. Watching it grow from an empty hull to a fully operational carrier took less than 2 years, a pace that startled foreign naval analysts who were still debating how many China would even attempt to build. Western observers immediately compared it to the American Wasp class, and the comparison is fair: similar size, similar mission, but built decades later and shaped by lessons the United States Navy learned the hard way. Defense-wise, the 075 relies on 230mm close-in weapon systems and a pair of short-range surface-to-air missile launchers, enough to blunt a limited attack but not designed to survive alone against a determined air force. That is, deliberate. This ship is not meant to fight its way in unescorted. It is meant to arrive after the skies and seas around it have already been contested and won. But its replacement was already waiting. The Type 076 is not just bigger, it is a different category of weapon. At 50,000 tons, full load, and over 250 meters long, it dwarfs even the 075. Construction was tracked by commercial satellites as early as March 2024, and the hull was formally launched that December, receiving the name Sichuan, continuing a naval tradition of naming major warships after Chinese provinces. Its flight deck alone stretches beyond 250 meters, wide enough to run flight operations that would have been unthinkable for any Chinese amphibious ship a decade ago. What sets it apart is not size, it is intent. The 076 is expected to carry drones as much as helicopters, using an electromagnetic catapult, a feature almost never seen outside full-sized aircraft carriers. 3 close-in weapon systems and dozens of surface-to-air missiles protect it, but the real story is what it launches: uncrewed combat aircraft flying reconnaissance and strike missions ahead of a landing force that hasn't even left the ship yet. This one was different, because for the first time, the carrier itself might see the battlefield before a single soldier does. Chapter 2: The Docks Behind the Front Line, the workhorses of the invasion fleet. From carriers to docks, and one ship still carries most of the weight. Before the 075 existed, this ship was the backbone of Chinese amphibious power, and in raw numbers, it still is. The Type 071, codenamed Yuzhou, has been under construction since 2006, and 9 hulls have now been completed, spread across the North Sea, East Sea, and South Sea fleets, so that no single region of China's coast is ever without one nearby. 8 serve the Chinese Navy, and 1, somewhat surprisingly, was sold to Thailand, making it one of the few pieces of frontline Chinese amphibious hardware ever exported. At 25,000 tons and 210 meters long, it is smaller than the newer carriers, but it was never meant to compete with them. Its job is different and more practical. Each Type 071 can carry 800 troops, 60 armored vehicles, and 4 hovercraft tucked inside a stern well deck that floods on command, along with landing craft slung from davits on either side. 4 Harbin Z-8 helicopters can also operate from its flight deck, giving it a modest aviation punch even without a full hangar. Range matters just as much here: 10,000 nautical miles at cruising speed, enough to project power far from Chinese shores without needing resupply along the way, and fast enough at 25 knots to keep pace with most of the surface fleet escorting it. 2 production batches exist, and the differences are subtle but important. The earlier Batch 1 ships carry older radar fits, while later Batch 2 vessels received upgraded sensors and revised command spaces, quiet improvements that rarely make headlines but matter enormously the moment a real operation begins. 1 AK-176 deck gun and 4 rapid-fire cannons round out its self-defense. Modest weapons for a ship whose real power is what it carries, not what it shoots. A dedicated hospital bay and command spaces also allow the 071 to serve as a floating headquarters during larger operations, coordinating everything happening around it rather than just delivering its own cargo. Chapter 3: The Old Guard, legacy ships that refuse to retire. Long before helicopter carriers and drone launchers, China built its amphibious force out of simple tank landing ships, descendants of a design line stretching back to the original Type 072 of the late 1970s. Many of those descendants are still on active duty today. Start with the Type 0733, a single hull known to NATO as Yudang, built to carry 6 armored vehicles, or 180 troops, or 250 tons of cargo across relatively short distances. It served for nearly 2 decades before finally being decommissioned in 2010, and even then, it did not disappear. It was converted into a supply vessel for the South China Sea, fitted with cargo hatches and a crane, still working long after its combat career had officially ended. Few people remember this one, but it quietly set the template for almost everything that followed. A close relative came next, faster and better armed. The Type 0723, known to NATO as Yuting, entered service in the 1990s, and 11 of them were built entirely at a single Shanghai shipyard. Each one displaces 7,000 tons and can carry 10 tanks, or 250 troops, or 500 tons of cargo, whichever the mission calls for. 3 twin 37mm gun mounts give it a surprising amount of self-defense firepower for a ship this size. It has a helicopter platform at the stern, but no hangar, a compromise typical of ships from this era, built for capability rather than comfort. One of these hulls, the Hai Yangshan, later became something of a curiosity in its own right. reportedly used to trial an experimental electromagnetic railgun mounted on its bow, years before anyone outside China confirmed the program existed. It was an odd second life for a ship originally designed to do nothing more exciting than beach a handful of tanks. A smaller sister ship arrived not long after. The Type 73A followed close behind, built around 2003 and 2004 as a scaled-down member of the same broader family, sometimes referred to internally as the Type 74-4, a naming overlap that still confuses even dedicated naval spotters. Smaller and less capable on paper, but genuinely useful, able to carry 6 amphibious vehicles or 180 troops on shorter, faster missions closer to shore. Exactly the kind of unglamorous ship a real invasion would depend on more than any flagship. Ships like this rarely appear in press releases, but a landing force without enough of them simply cannot move fast enough to matter. Then came the ship built to replace them all. The Type 72A, NATO reporting name Yuting-2, is the most numerous tank landing ship in Chinese service today, with 15 hulls spread across 3 separate fleets and, fittingly, for a class this large, built at 4 different shipyards at once, in Dalian, Fujian, Zhonghua, and Wuhan. It displaces 4,800 tons fully loaded and carries 10 armored vehicles alongside 250 fully equipped troops. The first batch entered service between 2003 and 2005. A second batch, built years later at the Wuchang and Fujian yards, began arriving in 2015, upgraded with a single 30mm automatic cannon, replacing the older twin 37mm guns of the earlier ships. Like most of the ships in this family, each hull is named after a Chinese mountain, a naming tradition that has quietly stuck for 3 generations of landing ships. A helipad supports 2 medium helicopters at once, and space is set aside for 4 smaller landing craft, giving even this older design a surprising amount of built-in flexibility. Almost 2 decades after the first hull entered service, this class still forms the single largest group of dedicated tank landing ships anywhere in the world. This one carries more weight than its size suggests. And then, there is a genuine outlier in this fleet, the Type 74A, nicknamed Yubei. It is the only catamaran-hulled landing ship China operates, a twin-hulled design built for stability rather than raw speed, powered by 2 diesel engines producing nearly 5,000 horsepower combined. At just 800 tons full load, it is tiny compared to everything else in this chapter, but it can sustain 250 troops for up to 15 days at sea, longer endurance than ships twice its size. A quiet reminder that tonnage is not always the best measure of usefulness. Its shallow draft also lets it work close to shorelines that would ground a deeper-hulled ship entirely, a niche few other navies bother designing for. Its older sibling closes out this chapter. Finally, the original Type 074, a smaller coastal landing ship built to move troops and light vehicles across short stretches of water, the kind of unglamorous workhorse that never earns a headline but is never fully retired either, quietly filling gaps the bigger ships leave behind, especially in river mouths and shallow coastal shelves where deeper-hulled ships simply cannot follow. Chapter 4. Ship to Shore, the craft that closed the final gap. No landing ship in this entire fleet actually touches the beach. That final, most dangerous stretch of water belongs to smaller, faster craft, and China's collection of them is now the largest outside the United States. The Type 726, nicknamed Yema, or Wild Horse, is a hovercraft built at Jiangnan Shipyard, in service since 2010, with more than 40 now active across the fleet. The first 3 units ran on Ukrainian-built gas turbines, before later batches switched to a domestically produced engine, a small but telling shift toward full self-sufficiency. It can hit 80 knots, fast enough that a host ship can launch it from 40 kilometers offshore and still deliver troops within minutes, well outside the range of most beach defenses. 1 main battle tank, or 2 ZBD-05 fighting vehicles, or up to 70 Marines, that is a single wild horse's payload, and both the Type 071 and the Type 075 can each carry several at once, launching them in waves rather than one at a time. 2 heavy machine guns give it a small amount of self-defense, mostly against speedboats and light resistance near the shoreline. Purpose-built basing facilities have gone up along the southern coast specifically to service these craft, with dedicated bays for loading vehicles and troops that did not exist a generation ago. Its quieter cousin gets far less attention. Simpler and far less discussed is the Type 068, a conventional utility landing craft with none of the hovercraft's speed or drama. It ferries vehicles and supplies from davits and well decks whenever a mission does not call for 80 knots, just reliable, unglamorous lift capacity, the kind of vessel documentaries almost always skip. Even though every amphibious operation needs dozens of them working quietly in the background, while the bigger ships get all the attention. Then there is the giant nobody expected China to build twice. The Zubr class began life in Ukraine, and Beijing bought 4 of them under a 2009 contract worth more than $300 million. 2 were built at the Feodosia shipyard, and 2 more were assembled in China itself under the supervision of Ukrainian technicians. At 555 tons full load, it remains the largest hovercraft class on Earth, powered by 5 gas turbines derived from a Soviet-era Kuznetsov engine design, 3 for propulsion and 2 purely for lift. It can carry 3 main battle tanks, or 10 lighter armored vehicles, and 500 troops, all at speeds over 55 knots. After the original deal, China kept building its own version locally, under the internal designation Type 728. Recent satellite tracking suggests at least 5 more have been built, possibly more, giving the Chinese Navy the largest Zubr fleet of any nation on Earth, larger even than Russia's own. Most are based near Zhanjiang and Sanya in the South China Sea, sharing purpose-built basing infrastructure with the smaller Type 726 fleet. Unlike a conventional hull, it rides entirely on a cushion of air, letting it cross ice, marshland, and minefields that would stop a normal landing craft outright. This one was different, because it turned a Soviet-era Ukrainian design into a distinctly Chinese production line, quietly and almost without comment. Chapter 5. Amphibious Armor, Steel that Swims Before It Fights. Every ship in this fleet exists to deliver one thing onto the beach: armored vehicles that can fight the moment they arrive. And that story starts with a tank most people have already forgotten. The Type 63A entered service in 1997, an upgrade of an older design tracing its roots directly back to the Soviet PT-76 amphibious tank, first adapted by Chinese engineers all the way back in 1958. Over 300 were delivered by the year 2000. It carried a stabilized 105mm gun and could launch from ships 5 to 7 kilometers offshore, swimming toward the beach at 28 kilometers per hour, with 2 extra floating tanks welded onto the hull just to keep it stable in open water. For its era, that was genuinely impressive. But the PLA wanted something faster and more survivable, and by the mid-2000s, the Type 63A was already being pushed toward retirement. A small number kept on only for training, or quietly handed off to a foreign customer in East Africa that still operates a handful of them today. The very first prototype of this lineage, built back in 1959, suffered constant engine overheating and never made it past testing. A rough start for a design that would eventually serve for over 4 decades. Its replacement arrived as a pair, 2 vehicles sharing one hull, one program. The ZTD-05 is the fire support half of that pair, a light tank armed with a 105mm cannon capable of firing accurately even while still in the water. Built on a welded aluminum hull to save weight, it uses the same 1,500 horsepower engine found in the Type 99 main battle tank, pushing it to nearly 40 kilometers per hour on water, more than double what the Type 63A could ever manage. Its infantry counterpart arrived on the very same hull. The ZBD-05 is the other half of that same family, an infantry fighting vehicle built on the identical hull and using the same water jet propulsion. Its job is simpler but just as critical: get troops off the landing ships and onto the beach as fast as possible, arriving alongside the ZTD-05's firepower rather than trailing behind it. This one was different, because it was designed from the start to disembark directly from an LCAC's ramp, not just from a beach landing ship, a small detail that changed how quickly an entire assault wave could actually move. One more member completes the family. Rounding out the family is the PLZ-07, an amphibious self-propelled howitzer that gives Marine units their own indirect fire support the moment they are ashore. A related variant, the PLZ-07B, was later built on the same Type 05 hull used by the ZTD-05, combining that vehicle's water speed with the howitzer's gun system, letting the artillery finally keep pace with the tanks it is meant to support. Together, these four vehicles form a complete amphibious combined arms package: tanks, infantry, and artillery, all capable of swimming ashore under their own power rather than waiting for a beachhead to be secured first. Chapter 6. The New Toolkit: Bridges, Barges, and the Ships That Watch Their Back. Not everything in this fleet is a warship, and the strangest addition to it might also be the most important one. In March 2025, satellite imagery caught something unusual near Zhangjiang: 3 self-propelled barges linking together to form a floating pier stretching hundreds of meters out to sea. Analysts name them the Shuiqiao class, meaning water bridge, and the design borrows directly from the mulberry harbors built for the Normandy landings back in 1944. Each barge uses jack-up legs to lift itself above the waterline and stabilize, then extends a telescoping Bailey bridge to connect with the next one in line. The 3 hulls even come in different sizes, roughly 110, 135, and 185 meters long, each suited to a different position along the finished pier. 3 barges together can stretch to roughly 820 meters, long enough for large roll-on, roll-off ships to dock in open water at up to 5 separate points and unload directly onto the structure, transferring hundreds of vehicles every hour, according to open-source analysis. By January 2026, a second identical set was tracked moving through the Pearl River estuary, doubling the known fleet to 6 barges. Few people remember that piers like this haven't been built for a military landing since the 1940s, and even fewer expected China to be the one to revive the idea. Unlike the wartime mulberries, these barges appear to have their own propulsion, radar, and pilot houses, letting them navigate under their own power rather than being towed into position, a level of independence the original Allied design never had. The final 2 pieces of this fleet do not carry troops at all. No amphibious force sails alone, and 2 smaller ships close out this fleet. The Type 54A frigate provides the air defense and anti-submarine screen that keeps a landing group alive against modern threats, a multi-role workhorse built in large numbers since the late 2000s, and now one of the most produced surface combatants in the entire Chinese Navy, armed with vertical launch missiles, torpedoes, and a helicopter of its own for hunting submarines ahead of the landing force. And the Type 022, a fast, low-profile catamaran-hulled missile boat, adds close-range strike power in the shallow, contested waters near a coastline, exactly where the bigger frigates struggle to operate effectively, darting between islands and river mouths, where radar has a hard time finding them at all. Its wave-piercing catamaran hull was unusual enough when it first appeared that several other navies have since studied the design for their own coastal forces. Every ship, every craft, every armored vehicle in this fleet exists for one purpose: to put steel on a beach and keep it there. From the oldest tank landing ship still limping along the coast to the newest hull still finishing sea trials, this is the largest amphibious buildup any navy has attempted in generations. Whether that purpose is ever truly tested is a question for the years ahead.